On the night of November 9th, 2011, a man named Oscar Ramiro Ortega Hernandez fired multiple rounds from a semi-automatic rifle at the White House, one of the most heavily guarded buildings in the entire world. The bullets struck the south facade of the building, shattering a window on the second floor and embedding themselves into the historic stone and glass of the residence. What made this event even more alarming was the fact that it took nearly 4 days before the United States Secret Service officially confirmed that the White House had actually been hit. For a brief and deeply unsettling window of time, one of America's most iconic symbols of democracy and power had been struck by gunfire, and almost no one knew about it. Oscar Ramiro Ortega Hernandez was a 21-year-old man from Idaho Falls, Idaho. By most accounts, he was not a trained militant or a member of any organized extremist group. Instead, he was a deeply troubled young man who had developed an intense and irrational fixation on President Barack Obama. Those who knew him described a gradual but alarming shift in his behavior in the months leading up to the shooting. He had become increasingly paranoid, speaking in conspiratorial terms and expressing a belief that he had been chosen by a higher power to carry out a mission against the President of the United States. Friends and family members recalled how he had begun to isolate himself, spending long hours consumed by what appeared to be a growing obsession. He had traveled across several states in the weeks before the shooting, and witnesses along the way noted his erratic and unsettling behavior. He was not a ghost or a phantom. He was a young man whose mental state had deteriorated to a dangerous point, and the consequences of that deterioration would reverberate across the country. On that November evening, Ortega Hernandez parked his car on Constitution Avenue, not far from the south side of the White House grounds. He then opened fire with an AK-style semi-automatic rifle, firing at least 8 rounds toward the building. The bullets traveled across the south lawn and struck the White House itself. One bullet cracked a window on the second floor, which happened to be near the private residence where the first family lived. At the time of the shooting, President Obama was not in the building. He was traveling in California. However, First Lady Michelle Obama and her mother, Marion Robinson, were reportedly inside the White House that evening. The Secret Service initially responded to the sound of gunfire, but, in a significant lapse that would later draw intense scrutiny, supervisors initially dismissed the incident as a drive-by shooting involving rival gangs on a nearby street. It was a stunning misidentification that allowed critical hours to pass without a proper investigation of the White House structure itself. The failure to immediately recognize that the White House had been struck became one of the most criticized aspects of the entire incident. It was not until 2 days later, on November 11th, that a housekeeper noticed broken glass and damage near a window on the second floor. Even then, the full scope of what had happened was not immediately understood. A bullet was found on the exterior of the White House, lodged in a window frame. Another bullet had penetrated the bulletproof glass of a window, but had not made it all the way through. The delayed discovery prompted serious questions about the protocols and response procedures of the Secret Service. How could one of the most sophisticated security operations in the world fail to detect that the building it was sworn to protect had been struck by gunfire? Congressional members and security experts alike demanded answers, and the incident became a flashpoint for broader conversations about gaps in White House security. While the Secret Service was piecing together what had happened at the White House, Ortega Hernandez had fled the scene. He abandoned his car near the scene of the shooting, and law enforcement quickly identified him as the primary suspect. A nationwide manhunt was launched. His vehicle was found to contain additional ammunition and other materials that painted a clearer picture of his intentions. Tips began pouring in from across the country as his face was broadcast on news networks. He was finally apprehended on November 16, 2011, in Indiana, Pennsylvania, after a hotel employee recognized him and contacted authorities. He was taken into custody without incident. When federal agents searched his belongings and reviewed his communications, They found evidence that confirmed the deeply disturbing nature of his obsession with the president. He had recorded video messages in which he spoke about Obama in threatening and delusional terms, describing the president as the Antichrist and claiming a divine mandate to act against him. Ortega Hernandez was charged with attempting to assassinate the President of the United States, as well as several other federal charges related to the use of a firearm and destruction of federal property. The legal process that followed was lengthy and complex. His defense team raised questions about his mental state, arguing that his deteriorating psychological condition was a central factor in understanding his actions. Psychiatric evaluations were conducted, and the court heard testimony about his history of erratic behavior and delusional thinking. Despite these arguments, Ortega Hernandez ultimately pleaded guilty in September of 2014 to multiple charges, including the attempted assassination charge. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The sentence reflected the gravity of the offense, even as it acknowledged the complex psychological dimensions of the case. For many observers, the sentencing brought a measure of closure, but the questions it raised about security, mental health, and the vulnerability of even the most protected places in the world lingered long after the courtroom doors closed. The White House shooting of 2011 did not occur in isolation. It became part of a larger and deeply troubling pattern of security failures that would plague the Secret Service in the years that followed. The agency faced intense scrutiny over its handling of the incident, particularly the initial decision by supervisors to dismiss the gunfire as unrelated to the White House. Internal reviews revealed that the response had been inadequate and that communication breakdowns had contributed to the delay in discovering the damage. The director of the Secret Service at the time faced pointed questions from lawmakers who wanted to understand how such a failure could occur. The incident accelerated calls for reform within the agency, and several procedural changes were implemented in its aftermath. Yet critics argued that the changes did not go far enough, and subsequent security breaches at the White House in the years that followed seemed to validate those concerns. The 2011 shooting served as a stark reminder that no security apparatus, no matter how sophisticated or well-funded, is entirely immune to failure. The White House shooting of 2011 remains one of the most remarkable and unsettling security incidents in modern American history. It exposed vulnerabilities in the protection of the nation's most symbolic address, raised urgent questions about how authorities respond to threats in real time, and shone a light on the dangerous intersection of mental illness and access to firearms. The image of bullets embedded in the walls of the White House, a building that has stood as a symbol of American democracy since the late 1700s, is one that carries enormous weight. It forces a reckoning with the reality that symbols of power are not invincible, and that the systems designed to protect them are only as strong as the people and protocols behind them. Ortega Hernandez will spend the better part of his life behind bars, a consequence of choices made during a period of profound psychological unraveling. But the story of that November night is not just about one troubled young man. It is about the fragility of security, the weight of responsibility carried by those sworn to protect, and the enduring importance of vigilance in the face of threats that do not always announce themselves clearly or loudly before they strike.